Good day, and welcome to yet another one of our Answers weekly updates. Today we'll discuss three topics as usual. The first is an update on the Ukrainian war. The second is the South African State of the Nation address, the SONA. And finally, we'll do a deep dive into the expanding field of AI and what's happening at the moment. So, the Ukraine war. A couple of big developments this week. Firstly, there's been a series of attacks in the Ukraine with an upgraded level of missiles coming through. And the more important thing for financial markets, I believe, is the fact that we are seeing now Russia taking steps to cut oil production. They are going to be cutting about 500,000 barrels a day of production. That's a significant amount, in the oil market, that amount of production can really push things around quite significantly. And I think that is something that we need to be concerned about going forward. There was a supply shock to the market last year when the Russians invaded, things like fertilizer, things like, agricultural produce, and of course, to a certain extent, energy were affected by this war. But supply chains have since adapted to that. But one of the things that we have had difficulties adapting to, of course, is energy. The Russians obviously don't have a monopoly on energy, but with an oil market as tight as it is, any kind of movement in terms of their ability to produce is going to affect the world. And remember, China is coming back into the global economy this year because of the relaxation of COVID restrictions. This means that we are probably going to see an uptick in demand at the same time we're seeing a downgrade in the amount of supply out there. So that could be a big issue with regards to oil prices going forward. Energy at the moment is already quite expensive. Yes, it's come down significantly from the war highs, but it's still quite a bit higher than it was from the trend we've seen over the last few years. Natural gas, especially in places like Germany and so on, are really significantly higher than they were a few years ago. And if you're going to be introducing this higher cost impact into the economies of the world, understand that that's going to obviously affect inflation, and it's going to reduce some of the optimism people may have around what's happening with regards to inflation falling down, especially in places like the US. Another uptick in inflation could really delay when we see a pivot coming through, because central banks are not going to be willing to basically continue, pausing or look at basically cutting interest rates. If inflation basically suddenly turns around and starts to rise again, only with a basically falling inflation rate are we likely to kind of see the expectations for interest rate cuts by the end of this year, start of next year coming through. Okay. The next thing is the SONA. The State of the Nation address, President Ramaphosa came out and addressed a couple of factors out there. I mean, there's some things that are important that I think we need to be concerned about. For instance, things like the universal basic income grant, etc., etc. But I think the one thing everyone was paying the most attention to was what's happening with the load shedding with the ESCOM. And regarding that, he declared a state of national emergency. Now, many are pointing out that the DA has been calling for the state of emergency in ESCOM for quite some time. And now they are saying that they didn't want a state of national emergency and using that as a chance to say they're hypocrites. But in reality, that's not true. The difference between the state of national emergency and the state of emergency ring-fenced to ESCOM is if it was just for ESCOM, then ESCOM could do things like, for instance, import diesel directly without going through middlemen, get some production on the go without having to have some approval from regulators and so on. Well, the state of national emergency is kind of the stuff they did around COVID. Remember when we couldn't buy pies, couldn't buy hot food, when basically a lot of stuff was restricted to us, it made no sense. That is the kind of stuff that it's fearful coming back in. And also remember when there were videos of guys basically driving or not driving, having multiple luxury cars delivered to their houses. There were so many cars that couldn't drive them. Basically, they had to have them delivered by trailer. That's the kind of fear we have as well. The looting is going to start occurring again. Because when you have this state of national emergency, what happens is there's reductions in regulations around, procurement, some of the things that are meant to restrict or eliminate corruption. Those things are relaxed or removed, which is obviously going to result in a country like South Africa having higher levels of corruption, which is, we already know the level of corruption in South Africa is extremely high. And the fear is right now that if the state of national emergency is going to be followed in the same way as these, one around COVID pandemic, it's going to be very ineffective in terms of actually solving the problem, and it's going to result in a lot of looting, a lot of money being spent. Remember, there was hundreds of billions of rand spent around the COVID pandemic, and a lot of that accounting has not been done properly. And from what I can gather, a lot of people got a lot of money without actually delivering anything on it, or not delivering what they should be delivering on it. Okay, so that's the Sona. And then finally is a deep dive into AI. Google announced this week, or Google/Alphabet, I'll use Google because everybody knows the name Google. But when I say Google, I also mean Alphabet, the parent company. Google basically has come out and kind of entered the AI market with a program called Bard. It's going to be added onto their search engine. They had an event this week, which turned out to be quite bad, as these events go. The search engine with the AI basically gave significantly worse, honestly, but some pretty wrong answers in certain cases. They got a number of things wrong. So it shows that the AI, if you ask the AI for an answer on certain things, you can't rely on that to be right. And that's a downgrade from what we've had with Google, where you can basically click on it and give you an article or whatever that you can look into yourself and see whether or not it's correct or not. You can go to the for instance, one of the things they asked us, what is one of the major achievements of the James Webb Space Telescope? And it said it photographed the first exoplanet, and that was shown to be wrong. You could have found that out had you gone to the NASA's website or something, or a number of different sources yourself, and you just Google it, and you'll find out what the actual answers were. Now, this is not something that's particular to Google's, AI. There's many examples out there of OpenAI's ChatGPT giving you some really strange answers around mathematics, around a number of logical problems that are obvious in one direction, and it gives you a totally wrong answer in regards to it. There's something that a child could figure out for itself. That's what the function is. AI doesn't understand anything. For it, there's no such thing as a car. Car is the word car. There's no such thing as a aeroplane. It's the word aeroplane that matters to it. It doesn't have an understanding of the physical world. It doesn't understand this kind of common sense stuff that a 5-year-old understands. That being said, it's a 5-year-old doesn't the 5-year-old understand in some areas, but it has beyond human understanding in other areas. And that combination of idiocy and savant genius is really entertaining, but it's not always useful, because in one case you may be amazed by the genius coming through, but you also need a certain level of basic competence in all the time for something to be useful, like search engines and so on. Now, that is just a problem with AI at the moment, but the advances in the field have become so incredible that it's I don't know if that'll be a problem forever. And the question is whether Google step into AI, whether Google's move into AI is something that we should be basically watching out for, thinking it's great, or is this going to be a case of like the Microsoft phone, okay, where Microsoft comes up with a phone, or also what was the Zune, was the Microsoft music player, where they basically came in after Apple and they tried to basically play catch up, and were never able to basically catch up to Apple because Apple had a better advantage, and the copycat version was never as good. Is this the case here? Is Microsoft the Apple, and Google in this case playing the role of Microsoft? We're trying to catch up with what's happening at Microsoft. And I don't think that's the case. Let me explain to you why. I have an article out on this. By the way, you can go to, I think, a website that will tell you more about it. But here is the little history about AI. Back in, I think, 2010, a company called DeepMind was formed. In 2014/2015, it was acquired by Google, made like part of Google's, other bets kind of facility. Other bets, by the way, Google has tons and tons of money coming in. So they stick some of that money and they did kind of spread it around, trying to figure out other things they can do. They've done amazing things, like Android comes from it. A couple other things that they have that's really useful right now have come out from it, but a lot of the money is wasted as well. But it's basically, you have so much money, use a bit of it, let's see what else you can do with it. And this was basically put into the other bets division. This was viewed at that time as being such a momentous decision, such a momentous acquisition, that people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Reid Hoffman, etc., got together and created OpenAI. OpenAI, by the way, is the company that Microsoft just bought. Microsoft just bought this company called OpenAI that was created because a bunch of rich people in Silicon Valley were so afraid of Google buying DeepMind that they created OpenAI. They pledged a bunch of money to it. Not all of it was used. It was supposed to be an NGO that was supposed to basically give AI, developments to the public. Whereas they thought what happens at DeepMind under Google would be kept in-house, because now it's more about commercial or whatever. That's turned out to be the exact opposite. DeepMind has been publishing tons and tons of research. OpenAI, on the other hand, has been restricting what it's going to the public. OpenAI also started off with this whole very, very optimistic, very, very utopian view about AI for the humanity and whatever. And a few years ago decided, no, we got something very valuable here. We're going to be a proper company, okay? And so they stopped being NGO and they became a proper company and created something maybe around 30 billion, definitely around 10 billion, because that's what Microsoft paid for their stake in OpenAI. So it's a tens of billions of dollar company created by this thing. Now, remember, OpenAI, stuff that Microsoft now has, was started well after DeepMind. OpenAI, as a backlog in terms of it just starting up, it also has a significant disadvantage in terms of staffing. It has like a third of the staff of what DeepMind has. And also, in terms of what it actually has done, DeepMind has been significantly more, there's been significantly larger, more important developments done by DeepMind than have been done by OpenAI. The stuff that OpenAI technology uses, basically, a lot of it comes from DeepMind, and DeepMind's basically publishing of what's happening. What I want you to understand is this. Google's DeepMind division is not a catch-up to OpenAI. OpenAI was the attempt to catch up to DeepMind, and I don't think it has. I seriously believe that this DeepMind is probably the gold standard. It's probably the best AI lab in the world, and it's not close. Other than something maybe out of China that we don't know about, the best AI in the world happening with DeepMind, the most complicated stuff happening with DeepMind. You may think DeepMind, those guys that had the Go program that beat AlphaGo, that beat that guy at the game of Go. Yeah, that's one of the things he's done. He's done AlphaCode as well, which does coding. It does AlphaFold, which does protein folding, which, if you haven't heard about it, is one of the most incredible scientific achievements probably in the last decade. Okay, and this is just something they did. Okay, and they give out to the public. It's a huge benefit to the humanity. Now, Google, for those that may not recall this, started off with the motto "Don't be evil." They've changed it since to be "Do the right thing." Okay, but they've always been a bit less cutthroat. They've tried to be a bit nicer, a bit softer with how they handle things, what they do, and so on. And that, to a certain extent, has kind of handicapped them in truly pursuing things as aggressively as they could have. Microsoft has always been a much more cutthroat organization than Google has. Now, with the acquisition of OpenAI by Microsoft, what's happened is that Google, for the first time, is facing real competition versus its number one source of money, which is its search engine. And so it can't be just playing these ethical games from a position of unassailable strength anymore. It's basically being forced to compete. When you're forced to compete, you've got to give away some of those basically nice, homilies, those nice, sentiments about, don't do evil and do the right thing. Google is very likely has a significant advantage in AI, like I mentioned, but they haven't used it because they've been too concerned about the ethical implications of using AI. And I think what's happening right now is we are seeing Google being forced by competition by Microsoft and OpenAI to more fully exploit its AI division. And it has the best team in the world. But it has another advantage that Microsoft doesn't have. Not there's a better team than Microsoft. It has another advantage Microsoft does not have. It has a better source of data. The way this works, the way AI works, is you need the technology, but then you need to feed it with data. The more data you feed it, the smarter it becomes. Without that data, you can't achieve what you need to achieve. In fact, there's many lawsuits happening right now around, some of these drawing programs that are basically taking pictures from the internet and working off that as data, and that data source basically is a vulnerability to them legally because some of the stuff is copyrighted, and there's argument about how they're using this copyrighted data. The fact that there's still that legal argument out there means that these guys can't just go and make up data from nowhere. They have to get data from somewhere, some real world data, in order to feed their programs to get that training that they need. Microsoft really doesn't have a source of this data. I mean, it has some things out there, but it has not been collecting data on its users or from its users for decades. It really doesn't. That's not its business model. It's not advertising. It's not like learning from users and so on. It doesn't have that data source. Google, on the other hand, is quite possibly the biggest collector of data of any company in history. Okay, you need to understand the what Google can collect about you and the data it has about you. The biggest thing is the Android platform. Google creates Android. Android basically is in your phone. Your phone knows everything about you. Your phone knows when you walk, when you sleep, where you go, what you do. Okay, There's a whole bunch of information your phone is learning about you every single second. My phone is currently listening to me talking to you. Okay, it's obvious. Some of this information is going back to Google from the stuff that we've seen and so on. That's Android. It also has the Google search bar. Every time you use Google search, it kind of like gets an interpretation of who you are as a person, what you're interested in, what you're looking for, what you're thinking about. Okay. Then it has the Chrome a browser that's also collects information on you. And then it has Fitbit that it's recently bought that also has health information on you. Then it has Google Maps. It tells where you go and knows where you're going and what you're doing and so on. And then it has this Nest, that thing in your house that basically controls your housing and so on. Google has sources of data that are vast. I mean, we're not even talking about things like Gmail, which we know for a fact that they trawl to get information about you. They do have machines looking through your Gmail emails to see what you're looking at, what you're getting emails about, and then they are advertising to you about that. Then you also have, for instance, the possibility of them looking at your Google Drive as well. We know they look at that because there's been some cases in the past where some people have been caught for child pornography on Google, because of some of the stuff. And how would they know that it's there? They have to have some way of looking at it. It's obvious. You can't just say, "Oh, there's a case of something that's happening. How did you know it's happening?" We had to look for it. With the Google Drive you have, those are all sources of information. Google, nobody has as much. Apple doesn't have as much. Facebook doesn't have as much. Facebook has a lot, but doesn't have as much. Google has the most. Oh, well, of course, YouTube. We forget about YouTube, which is probably the premier, social kind of networking, social system out there. Even Elon Musk calls it the S tier social network. YouTube is so powerful. There's no real competitor to it. And these are all things that Google has, collecting information about what you're looking, what you're watching, what you're knowing, everything, combined with the best AI lab in the world. Microsoft, no source of information, no real source of information, and the catch-up lab, my money's on Google. In fact, I think there's only a couple of companies in the world that can compete with Google in the AI division, and AI basically things. Of course, excluding the stuff in China, which we don't know what's happening. Apple, I think, has the ability with the Apple Watch and the Apple phone. Also, they kind of have the same kind of facilities as Google does with the Android devices. Facebook, I think, has some of these facilities as well because they have access to things like Instagram, WeChat, WhatsApp, and of course Facebook, and they have information about people and they can use that as well. And possibly something like Tesla. Tesla has some real information, but so on. But Apple doesn't have the real information. Google does. It has Google Maps, Google Earth. It does all that stuff. It has Google vehicles going around collecting information. Facebook, basically, they have the stuff on social networking, but does not have, beats YouTube on social networking, but it doesn't have a device. Okay, look what happened to it when Apple reduced its flow of information. The stock tanked. It has to go through other people's platforms. Google owns the platform. It owns Android. Okay, and Tesla, like I said, has the real world stuff, and obviously better than what Google has, but again, doesn't have the other stuff. So Apple may beat it in one area, Facebook may beat it in another area, Tesla may beat it in another area, but nobody beats it in all the areas. And Google basically might lose in one area to one company, but probably beats that company in every other area of data collection. So if you're looking for the play going forward into the AI sector, I'd be looking very seriously at Google. And this week, like I said, the price is down about almost double digits because of the fact that they had one bad presentation. That does not justify that fall. This is a company that has, I think, an unassailable lead in search, and I don't think that search can be replaced with AI, despite what people say, because AI might give you some great answers, but it's not going to give you enough consistency to you to rely on it. And even if it does, Google's going to have its own AI that I think is going to be better than what Microsoft has. There's only one little danger around Google that I think people might be concerned about, is that Google pays about, I think, $15 billion a year to Apple for a deal to basically do having the Google search as the default on Apple devices. If Microsoft was willing to spend maybe $20 billion on that, outbid them basically and have them use Bing instead, that might be a serious blow to Google. But I don't know if that might be something that happens. Bing has been considered to be the inferior network, inferior search engine. I don't know if Apple wants to basically reduce its customers' utility by making them use the second best search engine as opposed to using Google. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to speaking to you guys next week. Cheers.